Good evening and welcome to Poland Daily. I'm Nicholas Richardson and this is the news. A long-awaited moment has finally arrived. The President of the United States, Donald Trump, has signed a document abolishing the requirement for Poles to obtain visas to enter the United States. The decision comes after advanced talks between the Polish President, Andrzej Duda, and the United States President.
So Poland is a country, great people. We have a lot of Polish Americans living in the United States. I've just signed, I will soon be signing and signed certain preliminary applications. We will be giving a full visa waiver to Poland. That means that people from Poland can easily travel there and people from here can easily go back and forth. They can each. People from the U.S., people from Poland can very easily go back and forth between the United States and Poland. So they've been trying to get this for many, many decades. And I got it for the Polish people in honor of the Polish people in the United States and in Poland. So we're very happy with that.
According to most political commentators, the key question about the upcoming Polish parliamentary elections is, will the Law and Justice Party win enough votes to continue their independent government?
The latest survey of the Polster Research Institute for Super Express shows that were the election to take place this Sunday, the Law and Justice Party would win 43.4% of the votes, the Civic Coalition 28.5%, the Left would have the support of 14% of voters, and the Polish Coalition, formed by the Polish People's Party and Kukiz 15, would receive just over 7.5% of the votes. The Confederation falls just under the electoral threshold. Most surveys show that the Law and Justice Party has a chance to achieve an independent majority, but according to Professor Norbert Maliszewski, whether or not this can be achieved depends solely on the extent of the mobilization of the party's supporters. There are three scenarios. One scenario is the independent rule of the Law and Justice Party, but this depends on the mobilization of the party's supporters. The second scenario is an unstable government because the Law and Justice Party wins, but is looking for additional deputies, for example, former Kukiz 15 deputies. The third scenario is that the opposition forms a government, because this demobilization of supporters of the Law and Justice Party would be large enough for the opposition to gain a majority in the Sejm, even if the Confederation crosses the electoral threshold. According to political analysis, a high turnout will not work in favour of smaller, less prominent parties. Such small parties as the Confederation, the Polish People's Party, or Kukiz 15, that are just around the threshold, are not favoured by higher voter turnout. This means that the higher the turnout, the worse the results of these groups, and fewer seats for them in the Sejm. This also means the possibility of the Confederation not reaching the electoral threshold. The survey for Super Express was conducted between the 1st and 2nd of October on a sample of 1,088 adult Poles. The elections are just 9 days away.
Donald Trump has appealed to Ukraine and China to begin an investigation into the business connections of Hunter Biden, son of Joe Biden, the leading contender for the nomination as Democratic Party candidate in next year's United States presidential election. Biden Jr. worked for one of the gas companies in Ukraine and a Chinese investment fund.
Well, I would think that if they were honest about it, they'd start a major investigation into the Bidens. It's a very simple answer. They should investigate the Bidens, because how does a company that's newly formed, and all these companies, if you look at, and by the way, likewise, China should start an investigation into the Bidens, because what happened in China is just about as bad as what happened with Ukraine. So I would say that President Zelensky, if it were me, I would recommend that they start an investigation into the Bidens, because nobody has any doubt that they weren't crooked. That was a crooked deal, 100%. He had no knowledge of energy, didn't know the first thing about it. All of a sudden, he's getting $50,000 a month, plus a lot of other things. Nobody has any doubt. And they got rid of a prosecutor who was a very tough prosecutor. They got rid of him. Now they're trying to make it the opposite way, but they got rid. So if I were the president, I would certainly recommend that of Ukraine.
Trump suggested that an investigation should be conducted regarding the alleged connections between Hunter Biden and the Chinese market during yesterday's press conference. According to the Associated Press, President Trump and his lawyer Rudy Giuliani intend to create suspicion around Hunter Biden and his supposed Chinese ties, from which Hunter's father, Joe Biden, was to profit. This was also the supposed subject of talks between the American head of state and his Ukrainian counterpart Volodymyr Zelensky. When the video of that conversation was made public by one of the president's officials, the U.S. House of Representatives began an investigation regarding the impeachment of Donald Trump. According to the congressman, Trump was to pressure President Zelensky to compromise Joe Biden, who is expected to be the most likely competitor of Donald Trump in the next year's U.S. presidential elections. Seeking any sort of foreign aid in the elections is illegal in the United States. Trump firmly denied the accusations, stating that his talk with the Ukrainian president was perfect.
Today, Todd Phillips' Joker movie appeared in Polish cinemas. A few days ago, when this dark story premiered in American cinemas, the police were prepared for possible terror attacks in New York and other cities. The alarm was raised following disturbing references to the Joker that appeared on the dark net.
On October 4th, before the long-awaited premiere of The Joker, the New York police was prepared for a possible attack, shootings, or even a replay of the Colorado tragedy, where madmen shot a dozen people at the premiere of Batman in 2012.
The signs are on the door now for no backpacks allowed, no masks, no costumes. Anyone that comes in with that will be asked to leave or to put their backpack or their costumes, take it off, put it in their car. Otherwise, they will not be allowed in. And I myself, besides the other gentlemen that will be here, will be making rounds in and out of the theater to make sure that everybody's having a safe, good time.
Phoenix plays the role that reviewers have called brilliant and terrifying at the same time. The hero is a psychic castaway who casually gains fame through an act of violence. It is the suggestive character of the Joker that has raised concerns about possible acts of the aggression in the real world, although opinions on this matter are divided.
Most part, it probably is just a film, right? But at the same time, there's been some pretty crazy things happen in the past. So it doesn't hurt, like I said, I don't think, to be prepared. I think it's fine. If it doesn't add any extra concern or problems, then I don't think it's a bad thing to be prepared for it in case it did. So
I would wait a while for it to die down before I go to see it, and I'm conflicted about it because of the issues in America right now with gun violence, and it's a tough time right now.
Last week, the Warner Bros. Film studio announced that the movie has nothing to do with approving violence in the real world. In turn, police in New York, Los Angeles, and Chicago said that although they did not know of any specific threats, they had deployed additional patrols and were closely monitoring the cinemas in which the Joker was being shown. Fortunately, no incidents have occurred so far.
That's the news. Thank you for watching. Stay with us for the weather, business, and more programs. But from me, it's have a good night and a better tomorrow.
Good day, everyone. My name is Maria Kondzielska, and this is Poland Daily Business. Geopolitics become more and more popular, and the rules of geopolitics become the rule of our life. In studio, we have Albert Świdziński, Director of Analysis at the new platform Strategy and Future. Thank you for coming.
Thank you. Great to be here.
Let's talk about our future and the future of the world. Albert, you are Director of Analysis on a new platform, Strategy and Future, when you talk a lot about geopolitics. Right now, the eyes of the world are focused on Hong Kong. What's going on there? We have protests. There were many declarations that those protests will stop and the new bill will not be implemented, but still trying to implement it. What's going on there?
So Hong Kong has been rocked by those protests since June, really. It is in response to amendments to the Fugitives Act. And those amendments, if they were implemented, they would permit ad hoc extradition of Hong Kong citizens to other places in the world. And of course, the fears in Hong Kong are that this will permit extradition to China. And while Hong Kong is a special administrative region of China, it does enjoy a lot of privileges and freedoms that the mainland China doesn't. First of all, there are fears of the extradition. And second off, there are fears that it is this slow encroachment of the mainland China into the affairs of Hong Kong that will eventually lead to abolishing its special status that it enjoys. So this is the situation. Last Wednesday, Chief Executive of Hong Kong, Carrie Lam, has announced that the bill is being permanently withdrawn. Previously, it was just frozen or put on the back burner, and now it is completely withdrawn. However, this has not satisfied the demands of the protesters, who have coined 5 demands to be met by the government, or else they continue protesting.
Because Carrie Lam seems, her strings are very much pulled by the Beijing. Is this form of 2 systems in one country still possible to play, or still possible to work for citizens of Hong Kong?
For now, it is. It has been, I believe personally, that it has been a major success, that this bill has been withdrawn. The last time it happened was back in 2003, when some other amendments to the basic law of Hong Kong were proposed and were supposed to be implemented, and a series of protests prevented them from being introduced. So it is a big success. As far as Carrie Lam's independence from Beijing, I would imagine she's under significant degree of pressure from Beijing, and perhaps some decisions are made in Beijing. But at the same time, I think the problem is Beijing doesn't really understand the citizens of Hong Kong, the spirit, so to speak, over there. Because Hong Kong, for well over 150 years, has been under the British jurisdiction. So it stayed very much detached from the mainland China. And it developed a completely different culture. It developed a different understanding of the law. It developed a different understanding of what it means to be a citizen, because in the very much Western-like. Because in the West, if you're a citizen of Rome, you had certain obligations, but you were also granted certain rights. And this is not the case in China. In China, you do what emperor expects you to do, and you hope for a reward, but it's not guaranteed to you. And Hong Kongers grew used to this Western, Occidental understanding of citizenship. So now being plunged into the very much Chinese mainland world, they are not willing to accept it passively.
Yeah, it is different between way of thinking is obvious when you, for example, cross Shenzhen border to Hong Kong. And eventually in Hong Kong, your Gmail, your Instagram and your Facebook start to work again. And people are out there on the streets working, talking, playing, for example, on guitars and music. And the life is totally different than it is in Shenzhen. Definitely people of Hong Kong don't share the same mentality and the people of mainland China. The question is that the deal with Britain when Hong Kong was given back to China said the full unity between the 2 countries, or between these 2 forms, between the island and the country, will be made in 2047. So the future of Hong Kong, of course, inevitably is the unity with mainland China. The question is how quickly will it happen? Is this implementation of a bill element of a trade war between US and China wants to gather all the strength, including Hong Kong, together?
Well, I think Hong Kong plays a very useful role for China as of now. While the GDP of Hong Kong is right now a very tiny fraction of that of China. It's about 3%. In 1993, it used to be 27%, which just shows you how quickly China grows. At the same time, a lot of foreign direct investment into China goes through Hong Kong. It's an entry point into China. Because of this special legal system that they have that is based on transparent British legal system, and the police and all those things that are currently present in Hong Kong, means that it is familiar ground for Western capital to start off when it comes to investing in China. So I personally think that China in many ways is interested in keeping the status of Hong Kong as that entry gate. China is not looking to risk its position as a predictable power and responsible power in the world. I mean, a fun anecdote is when in 1982 Margaret Thatcher met with Deng Xiaoping to this. I don't know if you know the anecdote, but it goes that she met to discuss the future of Hong Kong because the lease was coming to an end in 15 years. And she, of course, was interested to have it prolonged. And Deng wasn't having any of it. He was clearly not receptive of the proposal. And then Ms. Thatcher kept pressuring him. And at a certain point, he grew weary of it all and said, look, if we want to, we will be there in Hong Kong today. If we're interested, we will conquer Hong Kong. Ms. Thatcher said, of course, you could do that, but then the eyes of the entire world will look upon China and will see what China is. So this concern is still very much alive in China. They still need to present themselves as a responsible power. They don't want to have their image tarnished in the middle of the trade war. So this is acting in favor of the Hong Kong people. At the same time, you have to remember that the whole calamity that China experienced during the century of humiliation began in Hong Kong. This is when China started losing territory. This is when it risked being torn apart by centrifugal forces. And this is where foreign involvement in China began. So now when you have those protests in Hong Kong, when you have protesters waving the US flag, asking for the US legislative to introduce certain bills, it must really bring very bad memories to Chinese collective memory, and they must be very concerned. So it's a delicate situation that Hong Kong is in right now.
Hopefully the situation of Hong Kong will resolve in favor of Hong Kong people. And thank you for watching Poland Daily Business. Good day, everyone. My name is Maria Kądzielska, and this is Poland Daily Culture. There are many theaters in Warsaw, but only few of them perform in English. Have you ever heard about the Cheerful Hamlets? Two of them are with me in the studio, Paulina Piórkowska and Janek Ziętara. Thank you for coming.
Thank you for having us.
But before we ask them a few questions, let's watch some of their work.
Well, it all started with
my lip designer. Suddenly he got all startled.
I threw him out. He came asking.
You know that new donut shop? It just got way too many sprinkles.
How it is to be a Cheerful Hamlet, how it is to be an actor performing in English.
As my friend put it, this is the best thing that happened to him during his whole university career. Apart from it being an extracurricular activity, I think it is a hobby for all of us. And it is a really nice way to spend Friday evenings instead of sitting in a bar and sipping beer.
How did it develop you? Did it develop also your language skills and maybe any other skills?
Mostly social skills, I think. And also, well, acting itself, we learn to express more feelings with each rehearsal, as we are asked to do many different emotions and we need to challenge ourselves each time. But I think that what is more developing for us is that we try our best each time, so we want to go to new workshops, to new plays in different theaters and to stage something more and more difficult for us.
Also, theater allows you to put everything in perspective. As in United States, for example, drama classes are obligatory for children so that they develop the sense of empathy, acting skills.
Yeah.
Also.
Is there any your dream play which you would like the most to have on stage, but for example it's hard to perform, or there are any other limitations which doesn't allow you so far, but it would be your goal, for example, that I can play Juliet on stage and then give up and go back to work life or start working?
Well, my dream is to stage a musical, any musical at all, but it's so difficult that I don't think we'll ever be able to do it. I don't know.
We had one proposition to stage, was it Measure for Measure? But for it we would need a revolving stage, so this is definitely beyond our budget.
And everyone would need to also sing in English, which sounds impossible.
We have many talented people in our group, and many people know how to sing, and they sing so well. And you can actually see it in some of our plays. We try to add this musical accent in each play we stage. And there are some people who play on the instruments or sing, and it's possible, but we need bigger stages.
And since after this, all knowledge which you get and get from this experience of the Cheerful Hamlet, is it still a hobby for you, or would you like to try, or are any one of you planning to become a professional actor?
I think our group is a really good head start for anyone wanting to sacrifice themselves to theatre. One of our friends actually got into the Theatre Academy in Warsaw and is on the second year of the director studies.
What would you recommend for anyone who would like to become a part of the team, how to prepare themselves for the audition?
We ask everyone for the audition to learn something by heart. It can be actually anything. It can be part of your favorite book or a movie or a song or a poem, anything at all. But you need to know it by heart, because after you decline the text, we ask you to do several exercises that demand you to know it and to say it in a different, totally abstract sometimes setting. So for example, you are asked to say the same text like you are in the announcer at their boxing fights. So you need to shout and everything, but with the very same text that you prepared.
Is a very mean question, which I'm going to ask you right now, but is there any text you know right now by heart and can perform in front of us here?
Let's do the scene of the Richard.
There's a lot of shouting involved.
Yeah.
I don't think I'm ready for it.
Anything small, Yannick. Elements from, for example, Richard III, where you played the main role. Give us something.
Sure, anytime. Now is the winter of our discontent, made glorious summer by this sun of York, and all the clouds that lowered upon our house in the deep bosom of the ocean, buried.
Wonderful. I think that everyone who watched this would like to see the whole play, Richard III, by the Cheerful Hamlet. And thank you for watching Poland Daily Culture.
Behind me, the Pałac Podlachy here in Warsaw. This is the home of Prince Józef Poniatowski. His home, the place where he had his famous parties, also the War Office. Who was Józef Poniatowski? He was in fact a major figure in Polish history. Patriot, general, Minister of War, sometime Marshal of France. Join me in this episode of Poland Daily History, where we learn more about this remarkable Polish figure. So Poland had assembled this large army as part of the French effort, and in the which later became the Fifth Corps of the Grande Armée. But at the beginning of the advance into Russia, of course.
I mean, that was one thing. That was the biggest unit that was wholly
yes,
Polish. But Poles were scattered all over For example, the Polish light cavalrymen in the Imperial Guard, for example.
Well, that was the biggest single body of
monolithic
body of Polish troops. And in the early part of the campaign, of course, the French, or rather Poniatowski, was under the command of Bonaparte's brother Jérôme.
At the beginning, but that was a very bad idea because I mean, Poniatowski had one thing in common with Jérôme. They were womanizers, but they didn't share the same military talent. Was a very weak commander, Prince Jérôme. But Napoleon, that was his very big life mistake, that he trusted his brothers and sisters, even when they were, plotting against him. I mean, he had a weakness. He had a weakness typical of, Corsican clans.
I was going to say, yes, that's what the French would no doubt say, well, he was really a Corsican, what do you expect? or they might have said that. But once Jérôme had disappeared,
Jérôme, he disappeared. I mean, he abandoned his corpse. In fact, he should have been executed
for desertion.
For desertion. It's as simple as that. But of course, Bonaparte turned a blind eye.
Being the emperor's brother, because he was probably given
some extra chance.
Yes, but this, of course, was for Poniatowski, the making of him, because then it allowed him to.
And Poniatowski, the point I was trying to make, that Poniatowski was blamed for this miscommandment, let's say, of Jérôme. And there was a very, very brutal scene when Napoleon was shouting in the presence of other generals, also Polish, and he was shouting at Napoleon that you are very, very strong, but with your horse and in Warsaw. That's what he said.
Which was probably...
I'm quoting.
Well, it was probably true. I mean, if all we've learned before about these chaps and their off-duty hours, I mean, that was probably true.
But after Smolensk, they reconciliated.
But Smolensk was in August, 1812 was the first major...
First major battle.
And then followed it in the beginning of September by Borodino.
Borodino, in Polish historiography called Możajsk, and in the French historiography called Bataille de la Moskova, not de Moscou, not of the city Moscow, not of the city of Moscow, but of the river.
Of the river
Moskva.
And as the campaign advanced, and I think it was by the end of 29th of September, the Polish troops were the first to enter Moscow. I think I'm right in saying.
No, that was in the. I don't remember the exact date. That was around. It was 1 week, let's say 1 week after Borodino that Grand Armée entered Moscow, and in fact the Polish cavalry unit, hussars.
Yes.
That were these men.
But they got there first. They got there before everybody else.
That was a gesture. So that.
And I think it's true to say that unlike Napoleon, Poniatowski had some sort of inkling that this wasn't going to end particularly well.
I mean, all these guys are very intelligent when they write. I mean, Poniatowski didn't have time, but all these guys are very intelligent post factum.
Of course, yes, we all.
And they say we all have told Napoleon not to march on Moscow. That he should have stopped at Smolensk. That's what Clausewitz put in his word. That after Smolensk, I mean, when Napoleon took the decision to continue his march after Smolensk, that was the end of the campaign, that he lost the campaign at that time. So these guys are very intelligent in the aftermath. What is the true? we have to look at. We would have to look at sources which are very rare because the campaign was short. And people didn't have time to write.
You make a point, because when you think of the distances, even today, that was a remarkably short, by the standards of the transport they had available in those days, a remarkably sort of quick to Moscow and back.
Started on the symbolically on the 24th of June 1812, and symbolically ended on the 5th of December when Napoleon left his troops and
at the end
went to Paris because he heard that there's a coup going on.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Poland Daily Travel. The next series of episodes will take you around Warsaw, looking at what is perhaps the most captivating and surprising feature of Poland today. That is the Warsaw skyline. Warsaw has the 6th highest skyline in Europe. That's after Moscow, Paris, London, Istanbul, and Frankfurt. The Warsaw Center, under construction now, promises to be 310 meters, and at that height, the tallest skyscraper outside of Moscow in Europe. Tall buildings are nothing new for Warsaw, surprisingly enough. Not a lot of people know that the tallest skyscraper in Central Europe was in Warsaw in about 1910. That's the radio tower. And then there was the Prudential Insurance Building, now the Warsaw or the Warszawa Hotel. So Warsaw skyline has in recent years become one of the most impressive in Europe. And it's continuing to rise. The Warsaw Tower will be marginally higher at 310 meters than the Shard in London. So we are going to go from the old to the new over the next series of episodes. And we'll also take a trip around the Palace of Culture, that iconic landmark which was a present from the Soviet Union to the people of Warsaw. Actually more like an offer you couldn't refuse. So sit back and come along. We'll try to show you something constructive, entertaining, and informative. I suppose we can build on that. So it's Poland Daily, and we're looking at the Warsaw skyline. Come along.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Poland Daily Travel. In this exciting episode, we are standing in the center of Warsaw and continuing with Arthur, our trip around the center of Warsaw, looking at the skyline. And what we want to do right now is contrast an old view of the city with a new view, or a combination new and old view on the other side here. But first, let's talk about what we see behind us, which is the Centrum roundabout.
Correct.
Rondo Centrum.
Dmowskiego.
And behind us, the Novotel.
Novotel.
Which was not always the Novotel. It used to be called the Forum Hotel. Right. Which was one of the famous hangouts during the bad old days, which were not always horrible all the time, but it was a famous hotel under the communist regime. Right?
First one with air conditioning in Warsaw, Poland.
First hotel with the air conditioning.
1972, Skanska company started, constructed it. 1974 they finished, but we modernized it in 2005. And that's has been the only one high structure right there until they started to construct, can you see, Widok towers.
Yeah, but what is the Widok towers? This is where it's called the Rondo?
Yes, yeah. Widok is the view.
Widok
towers.
Means view, but what was it? There was before the Rotunda.
But Rotunda is still there.
Yeah.
They also took it down and constructed the new one.
But there was nothing there. It was just the flat Rotunda. There was not this taller building. How tall is it going to be? Do we know?
95 meters is going to be
so just
Widok
under the 100,
towers
which
building.
Is our magic cutoff.
And 95.2 is Novotel. So they keep the same height, indeed.
I see, 92. So they're going to be the same height. They're not putting a very tall building here. That's the point.
Yes, mostly they concentrate in western section of the city
center. In the western section, it seems to be. It's like in Paris, they have La Défense. which is the or Le de France. Is it La de France or Le de France? I have no idea. But it is to the west of the main part of the city where they have the tall buildings.
Yes.
And over here we have behind us just the old central department stores, which ran for a city block, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
and then they are still there. They start to take buildings down in this area and construct new ones, but they are not as high as the ones that we are talking about today.
Okay. All right. Stay with us. After the bumper, we'll be right back, and we'll show you a different view of downtown Warsaw with some of the new and old buildings. We're going to talk about how this construction is carried on. Right? Sound good? Okay.
Sounds good.
Let's do it.
Let's do it. Ready.
This is view number one from the top of the Palace of Culture looking north. Arthur, as we look north from, you know what they say about the Palace of Culture? What's the best thing?
The best thing is to visit its viewing terrace, so to not see the
Palace of Culture
at all.
Yeah, exactly. Best view in Warsaw, because you can't see it. But that was in the old days. Nowadays, we like
Being
to see it.
sarcastic about this building is in a good taste. It
Yeah.
represents the part of our history that was very difficult for us. But instead of being miserable about it, we prefer to think that sometimes to reach your aims in your lives, you must walk the paths you don't want to walk.
Correct.
So it's a part of our history that we didn't want to have, but we want to have it in our memory because we Polish people are able to look in the future with passion, devotion, and respect according to the things that happened all over planet Earth. And that's why, yes, these skyscrapers are appearing
Yeah,
in
look at this. It's changed the whole skyline. You got, what is this building straight ahead of us? That's a tall apartment building. It's over by the synagogue, isn't it?
They call it the Cosmopolitan Twarda.
Right. And it grew out of the synagogue.
Yes, it's right next to the synagogue and it's 160 meters high.
Look at this building over here. Speaking of finance, the Warsaw Financial Center, right?
Yes, we can also see this one.
When was that built? That was 20 years ago?
That was not in the last decade, but in a previous constructed, still perfectly located next to Emilii Plater and Świętokrzyska Street.
Yeah, we have a cluster of buildings here. There's the Q22 behind it. They're about the same height, aren't they?
Yes, no, Q22 is 195 meters, and Warsaw Financial Center is actually 30 meters smaller. It's only 165.
Right, and the apartment building we were talking about?
That's 160.
Well, there you go. It's a good view from up here, isn't it? You got a view, sweeping views. You can see miles and miles and miles.
As far as the eye could carry. What a beautiful, statement provided from the top of the Palace of Culture and Science.
There we are.
Maybe not every single eye wanted to carry us in here, but as far as we are already in here, then carrying our eyes over there is such a pleasure, right?
Right. Okay, everybody, just as promised, we have a new view. Don't we have a new view?
Exactly.
And what is the view of?
The view of Marriott Hotel, which is called Lim Center, 170 meters tall, and it was started in 1987 and finished in 1989.
It was finished in 1989, right?
Yes.
And this is just before the so-called end of communism. It was here. They'd already given permission to build it, and it was a rival. It was seen as the American rival of capitalism, the uprising of capitalism. I love these scooter people.
Yeah.
They're insane. But
wear a helmet.
What are you doing? Anyway, so they wear a helmet. They mess up the hair. What are you talking about? It was to show American style, Western style capitalism versus the Palace of Culture, which is right there.
And that was nice.
And it was a real contrast.
And I also constructed another one, CH8 building that once upon a time was called the Oxford Tower, where we can see...
But that predates the Marriott building by a few years, doesn't it?
Exactly.
It's quite a few years, isn't it?
Yes.
Like half a dozen or something?
Like half a dozen or something.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's 150 only when it comes to its height.
You love those heights things. You're good on that, man.
Oh,
Were you good at mathematics in school?
Well, yes or no, depends
Yes
on
or
a
no?
day.
Yes or no? What? Yeah, that's not an answer. Okay, obviously you were not good at mathematics.
No, just practice.
Probably better than I was. But I was good at geometry. That's why I like the shapes of all these buildings and everything. I don't know what I'm saying. I don't know if that's true.
You know that
I
you
was
can
pretty
have
good at geometry.
you can go to the top floor of Marriott Hotel and have a drink over there with this beautiful view.
Yeah, you can see the Palace
There
of
is a
Culture.
sky bar.
Yeah, it's the panorama bar.
Exactly.
Because you can walk around and see the whole panorama, also, just like you can on the Palace of Culture. But the capitalist difference is when you have your tall building, you can sit in luxury, relative luxury, and enjoy a meal and something to drink and talk to a nice lady or talk to a nice man, you know, whatever your preference is. I mean, if you're a lady or a man. And, right? Yeah, and over here, you've got I love that. The guy just looks right at me and then walks through. Just like, saw the camera, looks straight at me.
Yeah, so that's my way.
It's funny.
Frank Sinatra.
I always walk here on Friday afternoon, and nobody's going to stop me.
That's my role.
I expect that from a pigeon, but not from a human being. But never mind. At any rate, it's a free country.
That's what we're fighting for. I can walk
country.
this way.
Of course you can. And you walk on the grass too if you want to. Anyway, good-naturedly, we continue. So you could sit in luxury and enjoy a drink, whereas over here you can just walk around outside, and if it's cold, right? And it's pretty stark. There's not a lot of comfort on the top of this building, nor inside the building.
Just come to Warsaw and visit it, right?
You got to see it, and then go over there and have a drink and look at it. You can go up here in the Palace of Culture and look across and see the Marriott and wave to your friend who's over in the Marriott. With some binoculars, you might see each other.
Yes, and I also love these people over there who are just relaxing in the middle of the city center, but there's a little bit of park, and these beds are over there. Can you see? How we call it? Hammock, right?
Hammocks, yeah.
And they are so big that there are two people over there, and still they can play hide and seek on that hammock.
Yeah, I didn't know they had hammocks here. That's a very nice touch. You can sit and relax.
Nice, and that's right in between all these buildings that we have been.
Okay, let's tag all these buildings, but let's tag on a couple more.
Okay.
Let's move on. Okay. Poland Daily Travel. We're going to go see some more buildings Friday afternoon in Warsaw. We're having some fun, right?
Yes.
Yeah, we're having some fun.
Wonderful.
We should go up there and get a drink. Yeah.
It's Friday.
Yeah, come on.
I have already practiced my answers. Yes, no. Have you got a girlfriend? Yes, no. Well, let's see.